Hi there, this video is all about nodes and variables in FlowCanvas for Unity. The first node you need on your graph is an event node, so I'm going to right click and Events, Graph, and I'm going to choose On Update. Event nodes have a red banner and they have no inputs and they have outputs, and some have also value outputs. So an example of a node with a value output, I'll choose Events, Object, and Trigger. So here we have a trigger and it's got three outputs this time: enter, stay and exit, and a receiver and an other object value outputs. I'm just going to delete that because I don't need it. Right click and delete. So after an event is fired, we need a flow controller. So I'm going to drag out and flow controllers and iterator and while true. So on update, while something is true, something's going to happen. Okay, so that sounds a bit abstract, but please bear with me. So a flow controller will have a purple-blue banner. It will always have at least one input flow and one output flow. It can have multiple of both, and they can have value inputs and value outputs. So now let's get a function. So I'm going to drag out and functions. I'm going to go for implemented, time and wait. A function node won't have a banner, and it doesn't even necessarily have to have in and out flow. What it does need is value inputs and outputs, because a function node is going to manipulate data and do mathematical operations. If the function node you're using doesn't have flow controls, it will usually have a little button in the inspector so that you can make it callable and then you can send it through the flow. Similar to function nodes are action nodes, but an action node will just do a thing. So let me just grab an action node. It's in functions, utility, log text. That's a nice easy one. So this action node will just do what it says. It's going to log some text in the console, and it has no value outputs because it's just doing its thing, and then the flow will continue on after it, or not if needed. So already on this graph we've got three variables. We've got the Boolean condition on the while true, we've got the 1 second time on the wait function, and on the log text action we've got the text variable. So I could write in there and say hello world, so the hello world is next to the log text, which doesn't look too nice. So if you drag that out and release, you can make it a linked variable. So then if I drop down the variables, we've got the text and the value that I put in hello world. So we could change the text here to output. So we got our output log text is hello world. And we could do the same thing on the while true boolean. Just drag it out and make it a constant variable. So that one didn't go up into the variables list, and that one is just sitting there. And on the wait, we've got the time there. We can make that a linked variable, and it's appeared up there. So let's call that counter, and it's defaulted to 1 second. Let's make it 2. So you can add variables, new, system, and there's a list of all your variables. And anything else you need. But I'm going to keep it simple for now. So if I press play, nothing's going to happen because my while true is currently false. So if I click on the value of that and change it to true and press play, so the counter's going, but I haven't told it to stop, and hello world printed out to the console. So you can see the flow working. We can make this more interesting, but before I go on, I just want to show you property binding of a variable. So if I add a variable, I'm going to write vector3 and vector3, and this is a vector3, and if I click on this little radio button, you can bind it to certain properties of the graph owner. Let's go off there. Or you could bind it to static, for example, the mouse position. So now this variable is just counting the mouse position. And also any variables that you add to your graph will show up on the blackboard. And you could even add them here if you need to, but it's usually nicer just to work in the space. I'm just going to remove that by clicking on it and saying delete variable. Yes, I'm sure. Okay, so let me just move this log text up here and get it out of the way, because I want to have an update and a finish function, because I want some other stuff to happen. Right, so let's get the inspector, and this true boolean I want to promote it to the variables, to the blackboard. So over at the end on this little radio button, I'll click that, and then I'll drop down and say create new, and now the variable, the linked variable, is now in the blackboard, and it's just got a name of value, and there's the check button, so it's true and false. Okay, so my name for the counter for the wait timer I think should be changed to countdown, because I want the update tick to have a counter. So let's add a variable, new system integer, and that one will be called counter. Okay, so if I drag out from this tiny little hamburger menu and drop my variable, I can either get a reference to the counter variable or set the counter variable, and I want to set it, which creates a function. So I'm going to, on update, I want to set my counter. So I'm going to add 1 to the counter, and I want it to happen on every update tick. So in the inspector for the set variable node, I can drop down and say add. So now it's every update tick, it's going to add 1 to the value, and the boolean is true, so it should work. And there it is, chugging away. Okay. So let's just move that out of the way. So that would just run forever, so I want it to stop. So I'm going to change the boolean. So I'll grab another reference, so I'll drop and set the value. On finish, in other words, when the timer has counted down 2 seconds, the value will be changed to false. Let's make that a constant variable, so it's nice and big. So the false will input into the value and turn it off. So if I just press play, it kind of shouldn't work. So it's counting down, and it fired off and it set it to false, but it's still counting. The update's still going through because I didn't tell it to break. So let's just stop that. So if I link up the done to the break, press play again, and wait 2 seconds, there, it's stopped. It's changed to the new condition, which told the wait timer to break. Right, let's move this over a bit. Now, on each node, there's these little hamburger display lists. So if I click on that once, nothing happens because all the ports are being used. Clicking on it again, it will completely collapse it. On this one, click on it, it removed the empty ports, so you don't have to see the empty ports, and click it all the way, it will collapse it. If you want to organize your graph like that, I like them to be collapsed to a certain level, and this one didn't have any outputs, so it collapsed it, and it takes away the outputs. So that's just a nice way of organizing your graph. So there's just a few more things I want to do before I finish up, and when this wait timer finishes, I want to send an event to another graph. So on the hierarchy, I've got a cube, and I've got 2 graphs on it, and it starts off with its boolean is true, and on awake, when the graph is awake, all it does is it sets the boolean to false, and then it's waiting for a custom event, and then it's going to set the boolean to true. And a custom event is just a simple event, custom, and custom event. Let's just delete that. So this cube's just sitting there waiting for something to happen. I'll go back to my game object. So I'm going to drag out, and functions implemented, utility, and send event. So the event wants to know the graph owner that I want to send it to. So I've got the cube here, and I can drag a reference of the cube onto the graph, make a variable, and then link it up to target, and FlowCanvas does an automatic conversion for you, so you don't have to worry about it being the right variable. But I can also, let's delete that, I can also just click on the node, drag a reference into the actual node there to save a bit of space on my graph. So the event that I want, the event name, let's go back there, is cube's event. So I just copy that and paste it in. So now, after, let's change that counter to say 3 seconds or 3. So after the counter finishes and it breaks, after it's finished, it will send an event to cube and fire off cube's event. So let's click play and watch it happen. So when it starts, it turns it off, and after the time, the custom event received, and it set the boolean to true. So the last point is you can set the Blackboard variables to be synced across the network. You have to add a new component, and I want scripts, node canvas, and sync Blackboard. And that's pretty much all you need to do to get it working, and it will sync any viable variables that can be synced over the network. And if you want to exclude any, you can just click on it and protect it, so then that variable won't be synced over the network. Okay, so I hope you found this video useful, and thanks for watching. Catch you next time.